Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Furious the Curious Show. Before we get started here, I just want to tell you a little about me. So I am host of the show here, but I also run a coaching company called Furious the Curious Coaching, where I help business owners and executives be successful without sacrificing faith, family, and free time. So if that's you and you're interested in that, check out furiouslycurious.co. That's my website to learn more information. But with that, enjoy today's episode.
I spend every day fighting against people that do nothing but lie to the public, and I cannot be someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about or be able to defend everything I say because I'll lose my credibility. Orders in council were never meant to be used like that. But this government, it's done a bunch of things, obviously, that are unprecedented abuses of power.
It's been really frustrating to see the last 7 years since the Liberals got in that a lot of these firearms are being taken from us.
We're taking action on gun violence. We're taking away all of the guns that belong to licensed gun owners. This is what non-gun owners are incapable of understanding. Something that happens to you when you become a gun owner.
Where do you get your news in Canada?
I just don't trust anyone. Where are the mainstream media saying, Mr. Carney, at present, we are paying $4 billion a month in interest, completely out of control debt. At 25, if you're not a liberal, you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative at 35 or 45, you have no brain.
I've seen it during COVID with the older generation, how they were just eating up the lies that they were getting.
What made Canada the greatest country on earth? Because I truly believed that. My entire life, there was no better country. But all the things that made Canada what it was that you just described, those are the specific things we're actually losing.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Furious the Curious Show. I am here with Rod Giltaca. You are CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. And I knew you were around from my time at MDT. Did you start this organization?
Well, I didn't start it. No, it was started by a group of people previously that were, I guess, gun owners that wanted some different strategies deployed in the fight to try to keep legal access to firearms. But I was recruited to be the first president of the organization.
Okay.
And I've been there ever since.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. How long ago was that?
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did they recruit you? What was it about you that made them think you'd be a good candidate for the role?
Well, I guess I'm a workaholic.
Okay.
So I do a lot of stuff. I like to work,
Yeah.
I guess is what it is. So I was doing business development in the manufacturing sector at the time, primarily into the United States. I had become a gun owner late in life, in my mid-30s, and just in my ambition to make sure I have no free time at all, I started a YouTube channel which got quite popular at the time. I look at it now; it's as cringy as it gets because back then it was all green screen and the quality's terrible and all the rest of that stuff. And I'm not, a performer.
Yeah. YouTube. What kind of videos?
Like firearm reviews and whatnot. And then I also started a training company with a partner. So we did law enforcement training and training for civilians, both the Canadian Firearm Safety Course and live fire training, room entry training, hostage rescue, active shooter, warrant service, stuff like that.
Okay.
And so I got exposed to a lot of that stuff, and I started to build, I guess, a small public profile in the training business and on YouTube and the firearms community. And so I guess a couple of people in that group thought, hey, this would be the right guy to try to give us a boost because he already has an audience, a small audience.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so now you guys are fully funded just through donations and stuff like that, or how does the organization run?
Well, yeah, we built the largest, most influential gun lobby organization in the history of the country, and that I'd love to say that was a huge achievement, but the gun lobby in Canada hasn't really been that effective or that large, didn't really have that many resources in the past anyway. If you compare us to like American gun groups, we're nothing. We're a little flea compared to those guys, but still we do some very innovative projects. We've done so many things that had never been tried. I wish it was working better, to be honest with you, because we're still losing, but that's just how our system works. But yeah, it's been quite an adventure, actually.
Okay. So now do you do that's full time now? That's what you do?
I've been full time with the CCFR for about 7.5 years.
Okay. So I worked at MDT for quite a while, and MDT Sporting Goods that sells accessories for bolt action rifles all over the world, and also got into being a firearms owner later on in life, and really enjoyed shooting and guns in general, and just hunting for small game and things like that. But it's been really frustrating to see the last 7 years since the Liberals got in that a lot of these firearms are being taken from us. But I don't even understand really how they're doing it, except for just like all of a sudden you just get an email or you see in the news that, hey, this gun you have in your safe, you can't even take out anymore. Like what have the Liberals done, and how are they able to just basically shut off the tap on a lot of just really regular guns?
Well, that's an interesting question. That'll probably you're probably going to get an unexpected answer. So it's a really good thing for people to understand. So in our system, which is the Westminster parliamentary system, the British parliamentary system, I guess, the government actually, unbeknownst to Canadians, has supreme power in every aspect of your life. There's nothing they can't do. And I was born in Canada. I'm obviously been here all my life, and I'd never seen that or been aware of that as a Canadian. And I think the reason, well, I'm fairly convinced, the reason for that is up until the last, I don't know, 10 years, right? We would never have seen a government use those powers the way that we've seen it in the last 10 years. No one would ever be so arrogant as to do that and Canadians, I think traditionally wouldn't have put up with it. They would have voted these people out of power and they would have never seen power again. It actually happened, what was it, 4 election cycles ago, where the Liberals tried to do the long gun registry. Well, they did the long gun registry and some other things, and there was the ad scam scandal and a bunch of things, and Canadians rejected them. In fact, the Liberals were reduced, I think, to 34 seats, which is the lowest seat count the Liberals had since in the history of elections in Canada, right? So back then we were people that wouldn't put up with corruption. We wouldn't put up with things that didn't make any sense. Well, now, because of the level of, we'll just try to keep it light and say political manipulation is at such a degree that these people now are emboldened. They'll engage in the most unprecedented level of corruption, and they're still capable of winning an election. And now that you're seeing these people so emboldened, they are not intimidated by the population any longer. Now you're seeing them use the levels of power that they actually do have. So as far as, I guess, to tie that to reality, the government has a legal instrument at their disposal called an order in council. And what that is, I guess, the equivalent to an executive order in the United States. Except in the United States, they have codified rights there, rights that you can't have taken away from you. We don't. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as we found out, is worthless. It's birdcage liner, like literally. So it's completely meaningless. In fact, in the Charter, it says flat out, here are all your rights, unless we decide you don't have them. So it's such a ridiculous document. But again, in the days when the Charter was written, which was the 80s, I believe, people would never conceive that the government just walk right over it and say, what are you going to do? Because in all reality, the only recourse you have is what the CCFR has been doing, which is the government does something it has no authority to do. So back in 2020, that was to ban, like literally millions of firearms using an order in council.
Yeah.
And then the only recourse you have is to sue the government, which we did. But we spent $2.7 million on that lawsuit so far. It's been 5 years, and the judiciary will not, it's almost like they won't acknowledge that what the government did was illegal, but it has to go all the way to the Supreme Court because no lower court wants to go against the government, it seems, for one. And for two, they don't want to be responsible for that decision. As an individual, this is just my suspicion based on behavior that I'm observing.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, push it up. So we're at the Court of Appeal. We should have had a decision a month ago. No decision is coming, probably because of an election happening, which is, if you think about it, totally corrupt, right?
Yeah.
There's supposed to be two separate hedges on power. So if you are not like the CCFR and you don't have $3 million to throw at the government to try to fight them in court, with a court that seems to be operating as an organ of the government itself, they can just do whatever, whether it's legal or not, they can just do whatever they want to you.
Okay, so an order in council, that's what they did. They said basically we don't want these guns anymore, and they said, done.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just an executive order outside of the authority of government. It's not the way that our system is supposed to work is you're supposed to use legislation for these things, where there's debate and some kind of transparent, the will of the people gets to be considered, and there's an open debate and transparent process, but that didn't happen. And orders in council were never meant to be used like that. But this government, it's done a bunch of things, obviously, that are unprecedented abuses of power. I mean, and we could go on for 2 hours about what they've done. This is a very unique group
trucker convoy and the going.
Yeah, Emergencies Act stuff, like very unique group of people. And, I don't, forgive me for giving you such a long answer.
Yeah.
But these aren't liberals. I'm a liberal, a real liberal, right? I voted for Paul Martin. Paul Martin balanced the budget, right?
Yeah.
That's what liberals, they were centrists. These people are not liberals. This is a completely different group of people. And they have exposed, as a group, they've exposed the vulnerabilities in our system. And now we're in trouble because they've set a new bar. Now it's like if you're a government, you just want to do something, whether it's legal or not, you just write an OIC and say, take me to court. That's okay. The courts are working with me anyway. You got nothing. And it's pretty terrifying, actually.
It is. Yeah, I definitely find it terrifying as well. Not just guns alone, but like so many other things. What do you think their motivation is to ban the guns? What was the drive behind that? Because it's not actually the safety of the citizens, because isn't that many shootings here. Like the shootings that have happened are illegal guns that have come from the States. What do you think the drive is, if you had to guess, or maybe you have some insight in that?
Well, I'm okay. Well, maybe I'll grant that it's a guess or speculation, but I've been at this for 10 years. So there's really two main influences. You have the ruling class in Canada, your Laurentian elites, as some people call them. The ruling class doesn't think that people like you and me, the serfs, they don't believe that we should have guns. Guns represent a problem for them on a couple of different levels, and I think one of the most important things is it creates independent people. I don't need anybody to protect me. I don't need anybody to provide my food. I don't need anybody they don't like that. They like you to be dependent upon them, which gives them authority. And so that's an ideological thing. It's influence that they don't think that you should have guns. They don't think that you should be able to make a pile of different decisions, that away from guns. Like there's all kinds of different things. They don't think that you have autonomy to run your own life. And the other side of it is a really great political wedge to scare urban voters into believing that the government is doing something to solve their problems, and they're the only ones capable of doing it. So it's a win-win for liberals and people on that side of the ideological spectrum when there's violence. So we had rising gun violence, and that's driven by poverty, lack of opportunity, social moral decline. Like these are the drivers of violence. And they all know that. Don't think for a second these people don't know what's happening or how to fix it. They all know that. But they negatively impact. I don't want to use sweeping statements like destroy, but maybe allow me to do that. They destroy the economy. They watch social moral decline. They encourage it. That results in violence. And so that gives them an opportunity to do the two things I mentioned. They make political hay with it by scaring people that don't know any better. And that's a lot of Canadians. A lot of them just don't know any better.
Yeah, why is that? Like, why do you think there was such a lack of education around guns and what's actually going on? Is that just because the media is so one-sided and corrupt in so many ways, or what is that?
Well, it's complicated. I think there's a lot of influences there because I've been, swinging away at this problem for 10 years. And human beings, we have a lot of attributes, a lot of talents, a lot of gifts, and then we have a lot of vulnerabilities. And I think what people are running into now is they have, with social media and media saturation and all this conflict and the gaslighting, right? The media and the government telling people things that are demonstrably false, that are right in front of them. It's like you're not.
Maybe some examples of that.
Well, gun control is one of them, right? We're taking action on gun violence. We're taking away all of the guns that belong to licensed gun owners who get a criminal record background check every day, 24 hours. We're getting these guns off the streets. Well, licensed gun owners' guns aren't on the streets. everybody that's acquainted with this topic knows that, right? So when you have the government telling people things, they see violence and they're like, we're taking the guns off the street. They're like, great, that's dealt with. I got to support this. So when you have that happening in, I don't know, let's say 12 different social political issues at the same time, and you're fire hosing human beings with information everywhere they look, people are glued to their phones. They can't help it. It's an addiction. And the information is coming so fast, they get exhausted and they resign themselves to just, here's my tribe. I'm a liberal because my parents were liberals. These are liberals. They aren't, but these are liberals. They're using the logo.
Yeah.
I'm just in favor of whatever.
Yeah.
And conservatives are terrible. And people they don't have the energy. They don't have the intellectual bandwidth, and they give up and they just like, that's my ideology. I'm a good person.
How do you fight that?
Kind of thing, right?
How do you fight that? How do you make that shift? Because I think it's bigger than even just gun rights. It's like it's so much more than that.
It is.
And you do see that, just that apathy of just like, I just want to unplug and just like disappear and not be part of this anymore.
Well, I want to unplug too. I don't like it any more than anybody else does, but I just refuse to let other people control me entirely. Like there's things that are outside of my control that they have control on, but I reject it, and I think for myself, and I have to fight at least at some level, because that's why we're put here. We're put here to fight for things that are meaningful, in my opinion, and we just got to keep going. But it's an incredible challenge, and I don't think everyone can be saved. I truly don't think that.
Why do you think it is an important right for Canadians to have the rights to own arms? Like it's something that's unique, I guess, in the world. Like America is the best example of it being something that's legal and good. And but if you look at Europe, where I come from, there's almost no one owns guns anymore, and it's super strict. But why is it important for, in your opinion, for a society to be able to own guns?
Well, the firearm ownership it's a really, really interesting topic, and that the answer to that question is really complicated and it's deep. So I guess you could start with the legal reasons in Canada to own a firearm, which is hunting, target shooting, collecting, inheritance, right? Those are things. And that's overall, I think those are the main reasons, right? Hunting is big, probably the largest reason for people to own firearms. And that's gone back since long before Canada was a country. Obtaining food and protecting yourself from predators or even crime. That's good enough. Like those two things are good enough, good and sufficient reasons to own firearms legally. And then you have sport shooting and everything that is developed around the ownership of firearms. This is a culture that is resulted in over 800 shooting clubs and fish and game clubs, conservation organizations around the country, representing billions upon billions of dollars in real estate and real estate improvements. And these are hubs of social society in Canada. And these, the gun culture and everything around it is just so meaningful. And then on an individual level, and this is what non-gun owners are incapable of understanding, something that happens to you when you become a gun owner. And it's so hard to describe, but I remember like it was yesterday because it was only in my mid-30s when I shot a gun for the first time, which changed the course of my life at that instant, which is when you control something like a gun. Guns are dangerous and they're powerful and they're also life-saving, and there's so many different things to so many different people. You have a sense of control over your own life. All of a sudden, you go from someone that's like, oh, there's someone's breaking into my home. I have to call another man or woman who has a gun to protect me. I'm completely helpless. I've got a golf club.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, I don't need anybody else to protect me. They can't anyway. They're there to clean up the mess and to launch an investigation anyway. I don't need another man or woman. I'm more than capable of doing that myself if I get to the point in my own personal development to do that. I don't need anyone else to source food for me. I can go find food myself. I can take care of the people that are under my protection. As a parent, I can take care of my family.
Self-sustaining.
Yeah, it's this level of self-reliance and this rejection of other people saying, you can't do those things. You must come hat in hand to me. I'm going to make you pay for it and I'm going to administrate it.
Yeah.
And you come on bended knee to me to provide you with protection and education, and for me to dictate your morals, and for me to educate you and your children, and for me to put you in jail if you misbehave, in my opinion, and all these things,
Yeah.
and for me to protect you. I don't need any of that stuff, and they do not. And when I say they, it's just like literally a ruling class of people
Yeah.
that has an elitist viewpoint, and they look at us like units of consumption that exist at their pleasure. And I know it sounds conspiratorial, but it's, if you just monitor behavior, that's what it's like. So that feeling, that self-reliance, that self-confidence, that does not work for a government that wants to expand, for a group of people that want to have more influence in your life. That's the people that are self-reliant reject that, and that's a problem. So
Do you think it's
yeah.
part of a Canadian culture to just accept this like elitist class to rule over them as well? Because we are the British, and like the Americans fought against the British, so they have it in their culture to fight against the government and not be controlled. And we never had that. We still are a British colony, and it's just kind of like an acceptance thing of like, because you don't see that like that fight back of like, hey, the closest thing was truckers going to Ottawa and peacefully protesting as like the biggest fight back against the government, which was soft in many ways, even though it was vilified. But do you think that's part of it, that Canadians are just too passive in fighting for these rights?
I think we were a good target, because if you think about, like, I'm substantially older than you are, and I remember, the Canadians had a reputation around the world as being genuinely good people and empathetic, obviously, and polite, and very considerate on, from in other people's viewpoints, and accommodating, and all these things. But at the same time, Canadians didn't put up with like Canadians of the 80s, of the 1980s, would not put up with the political behavior that we see today. The problem was that empathy, that good nature was weaponized and used against us. And unfortunately, it just exposed a weakness. And now you've got people that can just run right over us. And their only defense to their bad behavior is, like, well, if you want to be a good person, if you're the good person you think you are, you need to agree with this no matter what. Yeah. No matter how ridiculous and how insane the proposition. If you don't agree, you've given up your status as an empathetic, considerate, good person, as a Canadian. And that was a real vulnerability, I think, for Canadians. Whereas Americans, we're just like, you don't like it, that's something you need to deal with, because here are my codified rights, and I will not be physically or ideologically, influenced or victimized by you.
Yeah.
So it was a different culture. And I think it's taken 30 years to get us to this point, to get people that, again, sorry for the long answer, but I find this stuff fascinating. It's taken 30 years to get the average Canadian to reject, this is a great example, to reject the idea that if someone is trying to rape, assault, murder them, or to take their things, that they don't have a right or an interest in defending themselves when that's happening to them, that somehow that's morally inappropriate.
You mean before that, people thought it was okay not to defend themselves?
Well, I think before, people were like, yeah, you have right to self-defense. Like, if you think about it, when the charter was created, whether or not it's an enforceable document, let's say,
yeah,
people said, yeah, this is one of your basic rights.
Yeah, okay.
Your basic rights are, you can say what you want, you can associate with who you want, you can defend your life if someone's trying to take it from you, right? Like, these were all Canadian values in a document that really wasn't worth anything, but that was created because the public wanted it.
Yeah.
They're like, these are important Canadian values.
Yeah.
And now you actually have people that are, Elizabeth May of the Green Party declared in the House of Commons, like, this is so ridiculous. She was actually referencing us. You have no rights to firearms. In fact, you have no right to property at all. Like, that's something that's a good thing. Like, she was proud of that. Individual Canadian, you don't even have a right to own the stuff that you bought.
It's insane.
Right? Yeah, but it's taken a long time for us to
Yeah.
get to be browbeaten to the point where this is who we are now, or at least some segment of the population is.
Yeah. And do you think it's possible to shift back Like obviously that's what you're doing. That's the goal of your organization, like to educate Canadians to, and specifically firearms, but even just more in general. Like, do you see a shift happening? You're talking to a lot of Canadians and in the work you do. Where do you think it's gonna, people are realizing, hey, we've had enough of this, and it's gonna move back to reality?
I'd like to be more optimistic than I am because I'm inherently optimistic. That's why I'm still fighting
Yeah.
these people. They've taken basically all my guns other than like a couple of them. If we're taking the temperature right now, I would say if you look at young people are waking up far faster and by larger numbers than people in the generation of my parents.
The boomers.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
boomers, right? Because right now,
They still listen to CBC.
yeah, and it's terrible. I have lots of experience with CBC. One day I'm going to write a book about, the inside of the gun lobby, and I'm going to expose everything. Right now I keep a lot of things to myself because, it's just there's no benefit to exposing them. But holy man, it's Canadian media is really something. It's really become quite a terrible animal.
Yeah.
But young people are waking up, and they're being motivated. They're actually resilient against the propaganda, and they're resilient because they've grown up with so much of it. They've gone through their cycle like I did, I think, in my 30s, where I believed, Peter Mansbridge on CBC, that's where I'm going to get real information. And if he says something, it's true. And if you disagree with that, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
To, oh, wow, if I just look at evidence and take the emotion out of it and my nostalgia out of it, wow, things look a lot different.
Yeah.
And it's ugly, right? You're just like, oh, now I actually can't believe the government. They don't have my best interests at heart. So and that probably took 2 years for me, if I remember correctly. Well, young people they know that they can't trust everything. They look into things if they're truly interested. And one of the conclusions that millennials have come up with is, I don't have a future. If I don't inherit wealth from my parents, I do not have a future. I won't own a home. I can't have kids. I can't live the Canadian dream. It's been stolen from me.
Yeah.
And the only way to turn that back is for people to start acting like normal people again.
Yeah.
We need to build infrastructure if we want to have a productive first world country. You can't have government stopping infrastructure. I need to have a good paying job that has some kind of future. I need to start putting money away for retirement. And they see these things being taken away from them. And they see, and they can see the lying and the manipulating that's going on.
Yeah.
And that's why they're young people. Even when I was a kid, right? I was a liberal. They say if you're at 25, if you're not a liberal, you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative at 35 or 45, you have no brain, right? So it was young people that were liberals.
Yeah.
And I was one too. In fact, I investigated Marxism when I was 20. I'm like, this sounds great. Everyone's got the same.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wait a minute, I don't think this actually works.
Yeah.
But then of course I was liberal because I'm socially liberal. And I think just now kids to me, right, are starting to figure all this out. They're rejecting all this stuff, the ideology, everything, all aspects of that ideology. They're sort of starting to know better. So I guess a long answer is, it's changing for young people, but my question is, will it be enough, and will it change fast enough? Because the polls are looking weird in the election. And if the Conservatives don't win, and they're not perfect, believe me, I work with them constantly. They are not perfect. I have a problem with almost all politicians, but the Conservatives will stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
They'll push the needle back a little ways, and then we have to stand on them to continue to push the needle back. But if we can squeak out a win, it starts turning around. At least it starts pushing in the right direction.
Yeah.
If we lose this, I don't see a way back.
Yeah, I don't see a way back either.
Yeah.
What are the Conservatives' policies on guns? Like, does Pierre Poilievre, the leader, say he's going to turn back all these and give the guns back that we've taken from us? And what are his views on it? Because I can't really find much online about that.
Well, there's a lot out there. We don't amplify that because we don't like making this an election issue.
Because it's going to help the Liberals.
Yeah, because the Liberals just go to their supporters, we'll just use a charitable term, they're ill-informed supporters, and be like, Poilievre's going to make assault weapons legal again, which of course is a total lie. Assault weapons were banned in 1977 in Canada.
Yeah.
We don't have them, but whatever. They look like assault weapons. And that's good enough for people that don't know anything. But the Conservatives have promised repeatedly in full view of the media and everyone else, that they will repeal everything the liberals have done in the last 10 years. And we'll hold them to that promise. And there's no political advantage to not keeping that promise. They'll only erode their base. And if they end up getting a minority government, they're going to want a majority. So they will do everything they can to fulfill their promises. People are sick of broken promises, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that'll happen. But on the other end of it, the conservatives will never get rid of licensing because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right? Just like someone promising, like, okay, well, we're going to get rid of all licensing for motor vehicles. You'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Are you crazy? Like anyone can just get a car and drive around on the road with me?
Yeah.
So it's I think it'll just go back to being reasonable, and firearms are important, really important.
Yeah. What can individuals do, like the audience listening, or just everyday Canadians that want their guns, like what during this election cycle, or just in general, like in a grassroots movement on educating people that guns aren't all bad, and all the things that the media pushes, like very practically, what can people do?
Well, there's a lot that can be done. And as you know, I just got off a radio interview, and one of the questions was, there are record numbers of young people getting PALs, getting licensed to own firearms. And what's driving that? It's grassroots action that's driving that. So the CCFR created National Range Day, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago. So that's the first Saturday in June. And it's recognized by the Conservative Party. It's recognized by ranges across the country. And basically what that is for ranges to hold open houses where people can come and try shooting a firearm, talking to gun owners, all that at a very, either free or at a really low price point, where people can come in and try it, and they can experience that first, shooting a gun for the first time, getting over that fear, realizing why people own and use firearms. The best way to stop gun control, well, not so much gun control, but gun confiscation, let's say, I think that's probably a more accurate way of saying that, is to take somebody shooting. Because now people with a PAL and that own firearms are far less likely to want guns banned.
Yeah.
There are some people that are just can't stand themselves, that are, and there's a lot in our community. They're like, what do you need that for? It's like, well, what do you need that for?
Yeah.
Right. So they don't, there's a lot of short-sighted people around, but that's the best way. So I think things like National Range Day, things like ranges on their own volition, holding open houses, individual gun owners taking someone shooting, which creates, another gun owner and another stakeholder, basically, I guess is one way to say it.
Yeah.
And also doing, the CCFR does a lot of projects. We did animated explainer videos, right? Dispelling myths, dealing with a lot of legal issues, just making knowledge accessible to people. Just things like that. There's groups like the Canadian University Shooting Federation or something like that, which is kind of a franchised group that spawned themselves, having like shooting clubs in different universities across the country. And they've been very successful in at least taking a handful of people that would have been wildly indoctrinated in the higher education in Canada, which is terrible. It's a disaster. One of the most unspoken about disasters in Canadian society, in my opinion. And at least showing people.
Maybe just elaborate on that. What's the disaster there in the?
Just that in our educational system, even in Chilliwack, I'm sure you're familiar with what goes on here.
Yeah.
We're almost an epicenter in Canada of that. But the education mission creep, basically. You have an education system that says, we're not teaching mathematics anymore, or language studies, or, anything like that, or actual science, like demonstrable physical science. We're going to get into ideologies. We're the ones that are going to dictate your values, these are our children. They belong to the community. They don't belong to their parents.
Yeah. It's amazing how fast that shift has happened.
It's breathtaking.
It is
breathtaking.
Wild.
Yeah.
And how many people buy into it and follow through, which I think is partly the media to blame for that, which is the corruption on that side.
Well, they're exploiting vulnerabilities in human beings. Like, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
Right? We have, like I said, a lot of talents, a lot of gifts, but we have very serious vulnerabilities. and those have been used, those have been weaponized and used against people, especially just the idea that they attack your self-esteem, your self-worth. You are a terrible person if you don't go along with this.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to include everybody?
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, of course I want to include everybody. I
Yeah.
want everyone to have a place.
Vilifying and
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's wildly effective on a good portion of the population, probably, I don't know, whatever, unqualified number, 30, 40%
Yeah.
are too weak to say, well, of course I want to include everybody, but what you're presenting to me is a false choice,
Yeah.
right? It's a straw man argument.
Yeah.
And most people aren't capable of that level of
Why is that?
resilience.
Like it's just critical thinking. Is that just, do you think,
Yeah.
a cultural thing as well? Like that there's a lack of critical thinking and people are just,
Well, again, I think it's there's a lot of moving parts to why this works on people, and it's the fire hosing of information.
yeah.
And it's just not information. It's not like it's advertising. It's fire hosing of very fundamental core belief, ideological issues. Like these are big things to wrestle with. Like if you think of all this, so not to get into detail, but different sociological issues in our society right now, they are complicated. So you have these complex issues and people just getting fire hosed and then emotionally blackmailed over them. And most people are just like, okay, I'll just go along. I can't take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got 2 kids at home. I got money worries. My husband's dissatisfied with his career. I feel like he's drifting away from me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like there's people have a lot more going on than politics.
Yeah.
And then you add this hyper hypocritical, crazy politics, and you fire hose people with it and then victimize them. Like, this is about you. What side are you going to be on? It's like, I don't want to be on anybody's side. This breaks people. And we've seen that here in our town.
Yes.
As it applies to the school board. So it's, we're a microcosm of what's going on probably around the world, but most certainly in Canada. And it's like, man, people are so far outside of their authority in what they're doing, especially in education, that it's just amazing that it's being tolerated, but it's wildly toxic and it's not going to lead anywhere good.
Where do you get your news in Canada? Like I think I find it interesting that there's not really any alternatives to any big news organizations where you can actually get factual news. But I'm curious, where do you get your news, and where do you recommend people get their news in Canada of what's actually going on and what's actually true?
Well, unfortunately, it's funny. The news, the media, was supposed to be this ecosystem that was responsible to do all the filtering and the fact checking.
Yeah.
And making things digestible for the rest of us so that we didn't have to spend time every waking minute digging into everything to see whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
Like that was their mandate. And I wouldn't say they failed. They've just turned away from that. They're just like, okay, we're part of the machine.
Yeah.
And I think like I do probably 10% mainstream media or maybe even 15%, and 85% X is the social media platform that I invest my time into reading most, right?
Yeah. X Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. So formerly known as Twitter. So I scroll through there and I'll see something and I'll go, okay, well, does that add up? And I look at a lot of mainstream media, and I always, if I see something that is from alternative media or just an individual, I'll go actively look to see if mainstream media are addressing that. And if they are, what's their position? So that cost me a lot of time and extra work to figure out what is true and what isn't, and to also interpret that for myself. But that's important to me because I spend every day fighting against people that do nothing but lie to the public. And I cannot be someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about or be able to defend everything I say because I'll lose my credibility.
Yeah.
So when I wake up, I get a coffee and I'm probably on X or something else for an hour and a half while I get caffeinated and start to get ready. Maybe I'll look in there one other time during the day for 20 minutes if I'm waiting for something to render at the studio or whatever.
Yeah.
And then maybe a little bit at night, but typically not at night. But I have to invest that time because I can't trust anyone now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so everyday Canadians, like if it's not global and CTV and CBC, which I think are like 90% bullshit. I mean, is it X? Is there other, like, do or is it Rebel News? Is it like where do people go to get just like good news? Because
That's a hard question because I don't think you can. For me, I mean, maybe it sounds cynical, but I just don't trust anyone anymore. You know, the I think one of the biggest factors that is hurting the level of how well informed people are is lying by omission. So I'll give you an example. So CBC is covering the election, and the big problem with their coverage is they're looking at whatever's like the trending topic is. And of course they're biased, right? They're like, oh, you know, Pierre Poilievre still hasn't got his security clearance. It's like, of course he's got a security clearance. He's the, you know,
opposition leader.
yeah, he's opposition leader, and he was a government minister. Yeah, he's not a criminal, and he's probably not compromised. Okay, like that's you have to at least, you know, hold out a little bit of faith because he's pushing back against all the things that would indicate that you're compromised. And so the media isn't taking the time to go, okay, well, here's 15 different occasions where he's explained in detail why not, because he will be muzzled by non-disclosure if he's read into this foreign interference thing. Now he can say whatever he wants and he's not in legal trouble. The liberals would love it if he was read in and then said something that they could tie back, because then they would use lawfare against him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the security clearance thing, it's such a red herring. The media should be digging that up and go, yeah, so this is a red herring. It's a political red herring from the liberals. You should be able to trust media to do that. But the reason why you can't is because media are now, because legacy media is dying, they are hopelessly dependent on government subsidy. And there's only one government, well, really two parties, the NDP, but primarily the Liberals, the only party that can win on the left, that will continue to fund them. If Poilievre gets in, no more subsidies, and they're gone. It's an existential threat to them to have the Conservatives get in. So not only will they
do the other organizations like Global and CTV, they get funded as well by the government? It's not just CBC?
They're all getting some level of funding.
Okay.
And that when you start getting free money, like you own a business. Imagine that because you look at your revenue, you're like, okay, this is bringing in this. You know, you look at all your different revenue streams. Well, this is bringing in this. Okay, so in the aggregate, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I can make a living. But when a big chunk of that revenue stream is like, oh, I'm getting $7 million for nothing. Maybe your business worth $80 million, but that's $7 million. That comes right off the top. Yeah. That's your profit, basically. And you're like, that's gone. If the Conservatives win, how can that not affect you? And in the case of the CBC, it's $1.4 billion. Virtually all of their revenue comes from
it's incredible.
The Liberal government in particular. So of course they're going to do everything that, you know, and that is what has turned us into almost, I guess by definition, like a banana republic.
Yeah.
The fix is in. So, you know, and let me just give you one more example, because I've been using this a lot and this is really important. Where in Global, CTV, CBC, City News, CP24, whatever, have any of them asked Mark Carney if he's going to balance the budget and how he's going to do it? Have any of them said, when Carney said, oh, I'm going to allocate $35 billion, now he changed it to $25 billion for some reason, to, you know, for homes for everybody, modular boxes that people can live in, which equates to something like $70,000 per home. Like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
No mainstream media called him on that calculation, number one. And number two, where are the mainstream media saying, Mr. Carney, at present, we are paying $4 billion a month in interest on this completely out of control debt, more than doubled in the last 10 years of Liberal rule. This is your party under your economic, because he's been guiding economic policy for 5 years for the Liberals.
Yeah.
5 years. He's not new. He's not a new face.
No.
This collapse is of his making specifically.
Yes.
They haven't called him on that.
Not Donald Trump's tariffs.
No, of course. And you know, it's anyone that with a functioning frontal cortex could see that he's been goading. They've been goading Donald Trump into this by literally trash talking him.
Yeah.
And doing everything they can to get tariffs so they can blame this collapse on him.
Yeah.
Like anyone that can function at some level knows this. Has the media said a word about that? Have they said, you're going to add another $25 billion to the debt this year or even next year? when we're already coming up $100 billion in deficit. We are spending more on interest on the federal debt than we are on health transfers for our healthcare systems to provinces. Like, this is affecting this will destroy the country eventually. Yeah. You can't keep paying your credit card payments with another credit card without it coming due at some point. Yeah. Right? But this should be the most important issue in this entire election. Crickets. And so are they lying? Like, probably not on certain things, on many things. They're not overtly lying. They're lying through omission. Yeah. So Canadians are making a decision on, I hate Donald Trump, like madness. Yeah. Madness. And we're going to pay the price for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'll find out, I guess, on April 28th what's going to happen. But it is, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because I care about guns. I want to have my guns, but also just a bigger conversation of like what's happening in Canada and how many people are, I don't even know if the frontal cortex is missing. They're just being lied to, right? And just don't have better information. I mean, I have it with my family in Europe that are just like, they're conservatives in all these different ways, but they would have all voted for Kamala. And I'm like, well, why is that? You're just like, you're being fed crap and you're believing it. And it really, really sucks. Like, it just like, I don't want to see this country, I'm an immigrant to this country. I don't want to see this country just keep going down, which has been happening, and everything costs more, and people can't buy homes and don't want to have kids, and it just the fabric of the society is breaking down fast, and it's awful. So
what made Canada the greatest country on earth? Because I truly believed that my entire life, right up till about 8 years ago. Yeah, I truly believed that there was no better country. But all the things that made Canada what it was that you just described, those are the specific things we're actually losing. Mm-hmm. And I hate to be pessimistic, but I just have to look at things at face value, right? Yeah. But, I think going back to your original question, can it turn around is the most important thing. And it can, if we can at least get a minority conservative government. Yeah. Again, they're not the answer to all the problems. They're not the answer to every question. Government in general isn't the answer to every question or every problem. But it'll stop the bleeding, and it will put the brakes on this decline, and maybe we can start building back. Like, and if they can get even 3 years of a minority government, individual Canadians will see things turn around. They'll see the economy come around. They'll see public safety increase, because the public safety problem isn't licensed gun owners, it's repeat violent offenders and fentanyl and all these other things, the narco state that exists in Canada. Yeah. If the Conservatives clean it up, public safety will dramatically increase overnight almost. We'll get all our stuff back. We won't be angry anymore. Yeah. Unity will increase, like all these good things. So that's how we turn it around. So I'm hoping that we can do that. So I don't want to sound eternally negative, because I don't like that either.
But also not more positive than it actually is, because it is actually really bad. People, a lot of people, I think, would say, don't know how bad it is, especially the older generation. But they were just listening to the one news source of, CBC or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And you're going to go with the information that you have. And so, yeah. Well, I appreciate coming on. Thank you for the work you do. Hopefully we get our guns back here shortly. We can go and have fun again. So
I'm hoping, and I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Rod.